Evening to all our viewers. My name is Owens Milinga Matengu, the moderator of the Swapo Party Youth League panel discussions on health matters. I'm not alone in studio this evening at the Swapo Party headquarters, but I'm joined by two medical doctors, in Dr. Kanyemba. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Matengu.
Dr. Kanyemba is an orthopedic specialist with over 10 years experience in the medical industry. And then we are also joined by Dr. Kanyemba Nelson, Dr. Makemba, who is a general practitioner with over 10 years experience in the medical industry. Now, this evening's panel discussion is themed COVID-19 vaccines. But before the discussion starts, the coronavirus or COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 was first detected in China in December 2019. Since then, it has spread across the entire globe with a global infection rate of 191 million and a global death toll of about 4 million. Here in Namibia locally, we are talking of an infection rate of 113,000 and a death toll of 2,600. It's for this reason that the Swapo Party Youth League leadership, through our Secretary, Comrade EPHRAIM NEKONGO, and our Deputy Secretary, Comrade Christina Indaka, took a decisive decision to say the Swapo Party Youth League, being a transmitting belt of the Swapo Party-led government, cannot be spectators or take a back seat in the fight against this pandemic. A decision was then taken to say we need to come up with a panel discussion, which will then serve as an educational platform, which will then better inform the Namibian based on scientifically proven facts as to, number one, what is the coronavirus, and number two, what symptoms to look out for in relation to this coronavirus, as well as the immunity that the COVID-19 vaccines provide against this particular virus. So we really hope that these panel discussions will go a long way in informing our people so that they are better informed and take informed decisions based on scientifically proven facts, so that we go out in numbers, get ourselves vaccinated, so we achieve the herd immunity in order for the country to open up, so that we do away with this better normal, but live a good normal life where we don't need to wear masks anymore, we don't need to sanitize our hands or observe our social distancing. So with that having been said, let me engage the doctors now to say, comrade doctors, these COVID-19 vaccines, what sort of immunity do they provide against this deadly coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 as is known? Dr. Makemba?
Yeah, thank you very much again, Comrade Matengu. And as it has been alluded to earlier, my name is Dr. Makemba Nelson. I'm a general practitioner. I have been in general practice for about 11 years as of this year. Obviously, like we have said last time, we are now just picking up on our conversation that we have had last time in relation to COVID-19 vaccine and the immunity that it provides. As we have said in the past, that the whole concept of really being vaccinated, it is to train yourself or to train your body, to prepare your body in case that you encounter the real virus in real life, then at least you have a better fighting chance. That's one and first and foremost important statement I want to make. And also, we are saying that the purpose of really vaccinating is now to create the immunity that you have spoken about. And what will then happen with that immunity is that should you now pick up COVID-19 and be infected with COVID-19, you have a better fighting chance. You are less likely to develop serious illness. You're less likely to be hospitalized. You're less likely to end up in ICU. And of course, worst case scenario, pass. So the real message we're trying to drive across then is that should you get vaccinated, you indeed, are giving yourself a better fighting chance.
Yeah, on that point, just to expand on what Dr. Makemba has said, we first of all want to acknowledge this platform. I think it's important that we continue building a knowledge society. What does it mean to have a knowledge society? More and more, as we become globalized and as citizens of a global world, we need to understand from an informed perspective the sort of choices that need to be made. COVID-19 has affected us drastically. It has completely changed the way we live. It has taken away our loved ones. We feel that every platform should be used to fight this invisible enemy. Every platform should be used to inform our people that, look, this is what's happening on our globe. Can you imagine when this thing started way back 2 years ago in China, and it was diagnosed as a pandemic by WHO March 2020? We didn't know the drastic effects it would have on our economy, on our social life, and just on the way we look at each other. Can you imagine? I cannot see your smile. I cannot socialize as I want to. So that is what COVID-19 has done to us. Now, as Dr. Makemba has said, what is vaccines? The idea of vaccines is, just like Dr. Makemba said, is to give us a fighting chance. What does a fighting chance mean? It is important that we realize that death is what happens with COVID. Death and hospitalization with severe complications where your lungs are struggling. That is what we are fighting against. If we have that in mind and we walk back towards the vaccine, it goes without saying that our path in terms of making choices should be very clear to say this thing that's making us lose our breadwinners, it's making us lose our traditional leaders, that is making us lose our community leaders, that is making us lose our parents. This is what we are fighting. And vaccines are giving us a choice. So just as an introduction, that's the type of statement I would make.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, comrade doctors, scientific research out there shows that if I've been infected with a virus before, my body becomes immune to the virus. So one that has been affected by the virus will then be asking themselves, okay, my body, I was maybe diagnosed or detected of COVID sometime, and then I have recovered. My body is now immune to the virus. Why do I need to get vaccinated? Because my body is now produced antibodies that are able to fight off this virus. Why is there a need again for me to go and get tested? I mean, to go and get vaccinated.
Right. First and foremost, there are different types of immunity. And I think we have highlighted a little bit of that with our last discussion. You have what we call natural immunity or innate immunity, which means this is now things like your white cell counts. You're born with this circulating in your blood system that often helps you fight off infection when you are born into this environment. And then there's what we call acquired immunity, meaning that when you are now born into this world, you get exposed to different organisms such as viruses and bacteria. And then as your body is now able to learn how to fight off these organisms, you develop what we call memory to this organism. That is basically what antibody is. Now, the challenge is that you will find that, of course, the antibody that you produce against, organisms are also limited. And sometimes, to an extent, the duration of the immunity that is able to sustain and protect you might also weigh off with time. So now, when you get vaccinated, even though you have had or you might have been infected with COVID and you have developed immunity or antibody to COVID, as it might be, you still need to get vaccinated so that at least, the strength of the immunity or antibody you build up is, strong enough and is also sustained for a longer period. In other words, you have now, an assured position to say, should now this bug comes my way again, we go back to the same thing. Your fighting chance is better. So the idea really is that, even though you might have had COVID, it is advisable to still get vaccinated. And remember, even though it is rare, we still can get reinfection. In other words, you can still get reinfected with COVID-19 even if you have had it before. It is not common, but it can still happen. So what does vaccination do? Again, it just boosts up your immune system and really give you a better fighting chance.
So just also to add to what Dr. Makemba is saying is, if you look at it this way, with a natural infection, things are unpredictable. The fight is unpredictable. Your survival rate is unpredictable. What we are doing with vaccines is that this is scientifically tested, that if I give you this amount of dose of an X vaccine, you will build up a response in this way. And the tests have shown, the experiments have shown that I can count on that immunity that's built up. Therefore, taking the first dose and the booster dose is important. So it's more a predictable situation compared to a natural infection that's very unpredictable. This is also where the different discussions about variants and other things come into play, but as we go deeper into the discussion, then we'll learn about that. So basically, to summarize what Dr. Makemba is saying is that we are building memory in a predictable way, compared to a natural disease where we don't know. So that is a big important difference.
And also just to highlight, based on what Dr. Kanyemba have said, there is what we often refer to as a cytokine storm when an individual is infected with COVID-19, particularly if you have not been vaccinated. What does a cytokine storm means? It basically means it's a storm, like a storm, in a sense that your immune system is responding haphazardly in an attempt to fight COVID-19. And also in the process of your immune system responding haphazardly in an attempt to fight COVID-19, you will end up hurting yourself by that response, that your immune system is mounting up against the virus. This is now in a case of a non-vaccinated individual. And this is where also you find most of these severe kind of symptoms and presentation comes about, where people are very ill, their fevers are shooting high, they are getting joint pains, and all kinds of problems, That also emanates from their own immune system that is responding in a haphazard manner that is not predictable in an attempt to fight off the COVID-19. But now contrast that with somebody that has been vaccinated, meaning immunity has been built up and is in a predictable manner. So which means your body has been primed up already. Should now COVID come into play, you are most likely going to respond in a more controlled manner, and that cytokine storm might not be as bad in comparison to somebody that is not vaccinated, and you might not experience as severe symptoms like somebody who's not vaccinated, and you might not even need hospitalization. It might just be that you have a little bit of flu-like symptoms, maybe a sore throat here, a bit of a backache, and then within few days you are up and about. But an individual that is not vaccinated, and once they have this so-called cytokine storm, then you have all kinds of problems coming, and this is how people end up hospitalized, needing to be on oxygen. Some even end up in ICU, needing to be ventilated, and of course, worst case scenario, this is how we end up losing some of our loved ones.
And just to add a bit on, because Dr. Makemba has started another topic, if you really listen to what he's saying, is the differences between the effects on the body of what the vaccine does and what the disease does. And this is also where some of these conspiracy theories also come from, because some of the conspiracy theories would say that it's not the virus, the COVID virus, that causes the disease. It's actually the body. So therefore, the COVID virus is not the one responsible for the death. And that's one of the medical details that we feel are causing unnecessary controversy. If you look at it this way, the human body, once it gets infected, initially it will fight with that region of the body that has an infection, try and wall off and try seek to defeat it. Once in this case of the COVID virus, we know it likes the respiratory system, the nose, air pipes, and the lungs. We know that's the area where it likes. We know it likes a specific cell within the lung called the type 2 pneumocyte. We know it causes the destruction there. But if you look at the immune system as a whole, it's cells that come from the bone marrow, from the lymphatic tissue, it's throughout the body. So the response is mounted in the entire system. Now this mounting of the response in the entire system, that's what now reaches the havoc. And that's the danger of the original disease. Whilst with the vaccine, it's something that's given in the blood, it's not even organ specific. The body, it's like a friendly match. We call Botswana before the World Cup. Well, we know that maybe we'll meet Botswana. But now if we have a chance to have a friendly match, we'll see our tactics. Rather than now meeting Botswana in the World Cup,
for the first time,
it will cause destruction. I always say that somehow these principles can be understood that way without needing to be a doctor about those principles. So that's how you understand them. That the original disease, yes, you do develop some form of immunity, but it's a havoc story. Whilst with this practice thing, it's a more milder form, it's a more assured form. We're getting a chance to get a booster dose, so the results are much more effective. So you will hear things like efficacy being thrown around and how much percent efficacy and things like that. So that's basically what it means.
Dr. Kanyemba, you touched on a very important point with regard to the vaccine efficacy there. So the type of vaccines that are currently available in Namibia is the AstraZeneca and the Sinopharm. So when we look at the efficacy of the AstraZeneca, it's 63.1%, and the Sinopharm is 79%. So somebody out there might be asking themselves, but we are told that in order for, and it's proven scientifically, in order for a vaccine to be effective, it needs to be 99% effective. But if AstraZeneca is 63.1 and Sinopharm is 79 efficacy, what are the chances thereof? And one might also ask, say, is it possible for me to take one shot of AstraZeneca and then get another shot of Sinopharm just in order for me to have a stronger immunity in the body? Can that be possible? Or
yeah, on that point, this is where it becomes very interesting. One of the dangers of a more open social media-based society is that very scientific figures are now in the premise of the public. That's why somebody like me and Dr. Makemba comes in, because even though I'm an orthopedic surgeon, I'm more at liberty to read the scientific figures and interpret them. What does it mean to interpret? You must must remember that when these vaccines were studied, the whole development of a vaccine, first of all, it suffices to say, amongst the interventions that we have as human beings, compared to any other drug, vaccines are one of the most researched things. It is well researched. Compared to a hypertensive drug, for example, the amount of trial that the vaccine goes through is completely different. And it's very intensive. Now, because it's a research thing, there are certain variables that we're interested in. Now, we all know that, for example, the Chinese population, where this drug was developed, has certain characteristics within that population, right? Now, even though diseases are diseases for all of us, we know that certain diseases have certain effects on a certain population group. So, before we interpret these figures, we need to recognize that in the study population where this thing was developed, this is the figures, right? AstraZeneca was, for example, part of it was developed in the UK, a certain part of it was developed in the Americas. You will see that these efficacy figures for the UK population and the American population are also not the same. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say with these sort of figures, I think we're making an error if we read too much into it. What is it that we should pick up from these things? WHO, which is the institution that has said, when they started, when the research started with vaccines, there were about 100 odd vaccines on the market, 100. And only 8 vaccines made it as being effective for COVID-19. So those are the figures we should look at. Not specific efficacy, 70%, 90%, because the moment you start looking at it like this, you're saying, no man, what if because I was having a conversation, a WhatsApp conversation with a good friend of mine today. We were looking at herd immunity. And he was telling me, no, you guys want 60% herd immunity, so I'll remain the 40%. Scientific data cannot really be interpreted that way, you know? You must remember that for the sake of communication, some of these things have to be written in a certain way, but they don't actually work like that. What is the message then with a lot of these vaccines is the vaccine that you are offered is the one that you should take. Because remember, we are fighting death. And all these vaccines have been shown that they prevent death. All of them, without fail. And that is the important statistics to take. I think when one sits around and when people don't know that you are medically trained, and even within my family, when you sit around, you see that people are discussing all these figures, but they don't know how to interpret those figures. I don't know what Dr. Makemba can add to that one, but that's sort of how to play with it.
Yes, just like Dr. Kanyemba has highlighted, indeed, you know, the whole drive here really is to say that you vaccinate an X amount of people within a population, you produce herd immunity, you eliminate the virus. What am I trying to say? We're saying if you have, let's say, we're saying for you to achieve herd immunity, you know, at least roughly 70% of the population should be vaccinated, okay? Now, what then happens with herd immunity is that, you know, naturally, once you have achieved herd immunity, it becomes easier to control the virus because now majority of your population has developed antibody. I think that's probably the most important aspect in which we should look at these things. And like Dr. Kanyemba was highlighting, this percentage shouldn't be taken literally in interpretation. Because in as much as it says one is 62, the other one is 70, within another population study, that percentage might be different. So really what we're trying to say is that, the vaccines work, number one, and the idea is we vaccinate as many people, and then of course when we have done that, we will then achieve herd immunity. And herd immunity is our ticket out of the pandemic. Without herd immunity, you run into trouble. And once you have achieved herd immunity, you are then able to ease regulations, open up your sectors of economy. And then people can start going to normal life again. But without herd immunity, as soon as you open up, you end into another wave again. You are most likely going to spike and seeing a lot of people getting infected again. And that's what we're trying to eliminate, basically.
Comrade Doctor, I've heard you are saying herd immunity. Some people would be asking themselves, how are we going to achieve this herd immunity if there are 2 shots of each of the vaccines? So you are given 1 shot, and then you must wait for another 4 weeks to be then administered. So how will we then achieve the herd immunity if there is such a long waiting period of time? And we have seen from the statistics that have been raised by Minister of Health, people who have been vaccinated, who have been given 1 shot, have been able to pass on. So how are we going to achieve this herd immunity if in the case of AstraZeneca, you are given the first shot for the first month, and then you must wait another 3 months for you to be given a second shot? So how will we then be able to reach herd immunity in such a scenario?
Comrade Matengo, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you, and I'm hearing the questions behind the questions. And we'll try and address those, all those things as we talk. First question that I'm hearing you is, what is herd immunity? That's the first question I'm hearing. Second question I'm hearing is that, are we ever going to be able to achieve based on the long durations between? Third question I'm hearing you, that you are asking is that, yes, is this indeed effective, this herd immunity story? How do I explain herd immunity? If you have a group of 10 people in a room, and all the hands of those 10 people, they are holding hands and it's connected. So if you can think about an electric shock coming from me to him, to you, we are connected, right? This electric shock will affect all of us. What do vaccines do? Vaccines serve to cut the communication between us. That's what they do. So that when there is an electric shock, this electric shock ends up with me. That's the first thing. Maybe Dr. Makemba can take over while I'm fixing my...
Yeah, let's look at it this way, With herd immunity, as Dr. Kanyemba was attempting to explain to us, is that you trying to curb the spread of the virus in the society. And how you curb the spread of the virus in the society is by, then making sure that, as many people have built up antibodies to this virus. So you achieve that by vaccinating as many people as you can. They're waiting to say, now you have to wait 3 months before your second dose. That's not the catch 2020. Because if you are the only one that is vaccinated in the room of 10, waiting for 3 months to get your second booster is not what will influence herd immunity. What will influence herd immunity is that the rest of the 9 within the room also get vaccinated. That's how you achieve herd immunity. It's not to say now that I have to wait for a good 3 months, how can we achieve herd immunity? If all of us in the room are vaccinated, we will still achieve herd immunity, even if we have to wait for a duration to get our second dose. You understand what I'm trying to say? So it is not the duration between the first and the second dose that necessarily dictate whether herd immunity is achieved. It is the fact that you immunize as many people as you can.
And just to add on that aspect itself, as we are expanding herd immunity, there's also this big question that people who are vaccinated are the ones that are dying. Because we see the connection of these questions. Remember, the reason that there is a time period, and let's correct those time periods. For Sinopharm, which is currently available in the country, the interval has been brought down. I think initially it used to be a month. Now it has been brought down to 21 days. The interval for AstraZeneca also has been brought down. Initially it was 3 months, 8 weeks. Now I think it has been brought down to 6 weeks. Now, those time periods are important because what's happening with the majority of us? The majority of us, because remember, trying to build up this immune group, this herd, is a very complex issue. Because you are not saying that people need to be tested before they are vaccinated. So what was happening currently, because we have been seeing a vaccine hesitancy in Namibia. So the viruses were in our population. So what was happening is that people were already infected and then they were getting vaccinated. It takes a certain time period. This is why this is this whole thing about waiting for first dose and second dose, because you need the body to mount the immune response for the memory to be built up. So you don't know that when you got vaccinated, you got the disease probably a week earlier. So that is what was happening. Currently, if you look at all the statistics, there is no one, and I'll put my word on it, there is no one in Namibia that had 2 doses and then passed on. Even if there is that person, there are always other factors. Remember when we spoke about the initially, and I think all these questions are mixed. Remember, there's a risk population. All the current vaccines we are having are from 18 upwards, right? However, we know that the population group of 60, 65 upward, they are the ones that for some reason the coronavirus is attacking. On top of that, it seems to be that population group that have other diseases like high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, people who have been smoking. So there is a specific population group that is being affected. In our quest to try and build herd immunity, this risk group should be the one that should be protected. Once you start protecting them, we know that it is more than enough to start covering the rest of the population. So you start with the risk group, and then you move down to whoever, because of the herd. I think in Namibia, to build herd immunity, we're talking about 1.4 million people or so. So those are the complications with all these questions. The other question that you're asking about, are these things safe while you are building on? Remember that the statistics are saying that you need 2 doses before you completely build up an effective immunity. But we already knew that with 1 dose already, you are actually safer than somebody who has not had any vaccine in their system. So that's the whole way to look at it. Let me pause here and allow you to come in, because I'm talking about many things and I don't want our audience to actually be left behind in what we're trying to explain. I hope I sort of addressed some of your questions.
Well, definitely you have, Doc. Definitely you did. So the other question that I would want to find out is with regard to expecting mothers out there. How safe are these vaccines when it comes to expecting mothers out there? Because there has been a lot of myth and conspiracy theories going around to say Vaccines are not
One
safe.
of the interests of Dr. Makemba is actually pregnancy, so I'll leave that question to him. He
Yeah,
seems
now-
to like that.
Now, indeed, when the vaccine arrived, of course, we have something called contraindication. We have what we call a relative contraindication and absolute contraindication. Absolute contraindication will then mean that by any means you're not going to allow this individual to either engage in this or to take this kind of medication. Of course, there has been, a group of patients that has been highlighted to say perhaps it's not necessarily safe to administer, the vaccine to this kind of, a group of individuals. And of course, pregnant mummies has been highlighted as one of those, primarily because, there has not been any, studies done within that population group. And then again, if you now come back to the whole concept of herd immunity, now these are also the people that we will now be protecting if we achieve herd immunity. Because remember we said now for you to achieve herd immunity, figuratively you are looking at in a population of 1.4 to 1.5 million in our context. Now, if now you have now the other percentage that is not able to take, the vaccine, if you now have, vaccinated this percentage of people within your population, and then you have deemed your population having achieved herd immunity, these individuals then that are not able to participate primarily because maybe safety is still a question in terms of, should we go ahead and administer or not, this individual then become protected, by the whole concept of herd immunity.
And on those, because I'm just opening the latest national guidelines on the risk groups. Dr. Makemba has addressed the pregnant women risk group. The second more important risk group is the persons with comorbidities. Because there was this thing that, especially my friends were telling me, no, doc, I've tested hypertensive, and then they chased me away. So we have a very responsive government, and then there's a national outreach group where I raised this issue, and ED and the minister was kind enough to update the latest treatment, because you must remember, as a nation, we need to be doing the same thing. Doesn't matter whether you're in Katima or in Ketmans, we need to be doing the same things. Comorbidities are, what's the word comorbidities? Is any other sicknesses or diseases that you might have. The most important diseases are obviously the cardiovascular group, the heart and all the blood vessels. Under cardiovascular group is the important question about those ones that are forming clots, DVTs. Remember, it was a big issue in the news. You must remember that for those groups, the difference between the vaccine and the virus disease itself is it's much higher to get the clots in having COVID than from the vaccine. The second group is those patients with hypertension, high blood pressure. The story with high blood pressure is that there is no contraindication within itself for AstraZeneca. But for Sinopharm, there is remember what Dr. Makemba said about absolute and relative. As doctors, when you are doing something, you are looking at what are you trying to prevent. So if you look at, you are trying to prevent death compared to somebody who's having high blood pressure, the prevention of death takes precedence. Obviously, these things are done with consent. The other group of patients are people with chronic lung diseases, people who are asthmatic, people who have cancer and liver disease. You must remember, we are trying to protect these people in the first place. So they must take this vaccine. The other group of people are people with HIV and AIDS. Definitely another risk group that needs to be covered. People with other immunocompromising conditions, again here, it's looking at, because you must remember that we with this show, we are trying to inform you that you need to form a relationship with your health also. you need to know how healthy you are. You must remember that some of the deaths that have been seen after COVID vaccinations and the COVID disease started, we cannot apportion blame to COVID alone. There were other issues that we didn't know about. And those are probably the issues that caused death. Just to highlight 3 more issues when it comes to vaccines, there's a misconception where you are vaccinated and then you test positive. Remember that the COVID vaccine are not full viruses. Yeah, they are just pieces of viruses. So if you do test positive after a COVID vaccine, it means that you actually had COVID. It's not from the vaccine. You understand that one. The other issue was with the influenza vaccine. If you had influenza vaccine, can you take the COVID vaccine as well? You need to wait for 2 weeks because these things can cross-react. And that's where the trouble is. What does cross-reaction mean? It means that the whole point of doing an immunization or a vaccination is that you are trying to bring the immune system up. So if the immune system is already flaring from the influenza vaccine and you are bringing on, you are overloading the body, and that can cause a problem. So those are the big. I wanted to add the controversies in case we forget them. I wanted to add them with pregnancy so that we touch all of them, because these are the things that keep coming up, and this is what we're trying to let our community know that yes, we need to have this vaccine in spite of those things. And we'll just look at these issues when you come to the vaccination centers.
The other question that we want you to provide clarity on is regard to the speed at which these vaccines have been developed. Now we've got other diseases such as hepatitis E and malaria that took time for the vaccines to be developed. But when you look in the case of the coronavirus, almost within a short period of time of 1 year, the vaccines have been manufactured. So people are asking themselves, but how come we are quick to find or manufacture viruses for coronavirus, whereas for other illnesses such as hepatitis E and all the other viruses, it took time for the vaccines to be developed. So how safe are these vaccines that were developed within a period of over a year?
All right, let me try and address that in a manner that is going to help our viewers also tonight to comprehend what basically has happened and is happening. You see, just like in all other industries, we have spoken about the aspect of intellectual properties. Technology has advanced so much. And if you look at the timeline, and if you look at the history of how vaccine has been developed over the centuries, yes, indeed, historically, some of the vaccines took time. But then if you compare the technology of the day when those vaccines, were then being manufactured, comparing that to today, you and I can appreciate that, those are two worlds apart. The very same way that you look at, other industries, how long did it take us, 100 years to put up a skyscraper? It took weeks and months. Nowadays, people can build a 50-story building within a space of, 20, 30 days. So why? Because there has been other modalities that has been developed that can fast-track the work. The same thing is happening in the medical fraternity. You have so much advancement in technology. Research is fast-tracked now, and then of course, people are looking at alternative ways of studying, these, products in terms of, their efficacy and, their safety, for human consumption. And that has been achieved in the shortest period of time. And then, of course, understand we are dealing with a pandemic. It is a catastrophic pandemic. It is a storm. It is wiping out everything that it comes across. It's a global phenomenon. So when this thing hit the world, indeed, the medical fraternity was, alert enough to say, look, we got to go out and we gotta do this thing, the best we can, the fastest we can, in order to preserve lives. So, and this is basically what has transpired. And it's different countries, all are pooling resources, in their own capacity, trying to come up with the best solution to humanity. So I think the speed at which vaccines have been developed, particularly in relation to COVID-19, should not scare people into thinking that, now this thing came out within a year, but others took years. No, it definitely will happen that way. And of course, going forward, we will see most things will, be produced at the fastest rate, then compared to what happened, centuries ago, because we have advanced in anyway.
Not to paraphrase what Dr. Makemba is saying, is you must remember with COVID-19, many unprecedented things happened. And I remember one of the discussions we are having as Youth League, and we are hoping that youth are listening to our program, is that resources were made available in the developed world, both from the private sector and also from government institutions. This was unprecedented. Additionally, there was sharing of information amongst competing companies. Yeah. You saw that AstraZeneca in the UK was suddenly complementing with AstraZeneca in the North Americas. You must also remember that, like Dr. Makemba was saying, the evolution of scientific knowledge was also summoned to solve one problem. Looking at the vaccination development process itself, there's about 6 stages of how a vaccine develops. For COVID-19, the regulatory authorities agreed that they will do a few things. One of the things that they did is emergency approval. Before COVID, there was no such thing. What does emergency approval mean? Is that because this disease is deadly, once we find that the vaccine is effective and it doesn't cause death, we can approve it. That is what happened. Looking at the stages of vaccine development, research, testing, manufacturing, then upscaling. All these things were squeezed together in one. So what was happening? When you are doing research for a vaccine, you take a vaccine that is known, for example, right, not to have any deleterious effects. You use that technology. You take the disease that you are interested in. Then you choose a population group that will volunteer. This is another thing that I want to appeal to us Africans. Imagine if these people came to Africa and they said, we want volunteers. You see, us Africans, we must also start appreciating the rest of the world for the type of things that they did. I promise you, if these people came to Africa and said, Mr. Matengu, do you volunteer to take this experimental drug? All of us would be dead. So there were this group of people that initially decided, no, they will take this vaccine as an experiment for the rest of humanity. Once this vaccine was seen to be effective in this small group, it was now expanded to a bigger group. And all of these things were happening at the same time, which was unprecedented. Before COVID-19, all these things needed to be having their own time. Regulatory authorities needed to come in, approve every step. All those things were exempted. And the world was also coming together under the World Health Organization as the authority to approve every drug. Before, you would find out that AstraZeneca would do its own thing, Pfizer would do its own thing this side, Sinopharm would do its own thing there in China. But now all of them agreed to the rules that were put up by WHO. And WHO was the final authority. Looking at geopolitics, since we are under a political arm, we can still see that, that ugly thing about, no, we're not going to accept Sinopharm in this country. Unfortunately, that is still at play. And we hope those type of things will die a natural death, because humanity doesn't need those type of things. What I would appeal to Youth League listeners and a challenge that I would give is, where are we? Where are we as Africans in this whole thing? There was that African Union Assembly. One hoped that when the comrade of the delegates were fighting for the presidency of the African Union, one wished that the vaccination topic came up, but when we were listening, none of them spoke of vaccines. They were just fighting to be president, So these are the topics, and this is why we appreciate that the Youth League has availed this platform where we can discuss this type of things.
But you mentioned a very important point there, Dr. Kanyemba, to say some countries are opting to prohibit entry into their countries if you don't have a certain type of vaccine. How does that play out? Because the common denominator here at the end of the day is supposed to be that of preserving lives. But now, where preferences need to be given to say you need to take a certain vaccine in order to be allowed in a certain country as opposed, but that creates a lot of confusion in the minds of the public out there, because the common denominator here, or the bigger goal, is supposed to save life as opposed to which vaccine has been administered. And
yeah, let me just highlight what Dr. Kanyemba just said earlier. Geopolitics, it's an enemy to humanity. We don't always realize it. Now, there's also a concept that says when the elephants fight, often the grass suffer. So now, unfortunately, this is a very unfortunate event as it is and as it unfolds. That, of course, individual nations with some level of authority, power, and economic muscles would want to exert, authority over others, based on their own motives and what their objectives are and in what they are trying to achieve, only known to them. So this is where you find countries in their own individual basis, or unions or part of the world or regions will then make these decisions. And I don't want the community out there and everybody listening to consume those, sediments and, news feeds and use that, as a platform to making decisions whether to get vaccinated or not. Those are individual nations, they make these decisions based on their individual policies, on their, outlook on life and society and how they deem and see the world. So, and as you have highlighted earlier, we're supposed to make decisions that are geared at, preserving human life. And unfortunately, the geopolitics, doesn't really, help us in that way. And that's where you find now a part of a nation saying, if you have taken this vaccine, you probably are not deemed fit to enter our space. The fact that they are saying you're not deemed to enter their space is not because you have taken a wrong vaccine or a substandard vaccine. It just means that, there's geopolitics playing out there.
And Dr. Makemba is being very diplomatic about this. I want to take another route. I want this to be a challenge to us Africans who are consumers of life, we are consuming without contributing. I think this is an absolute, I hate it with a passion. I think in my next life, maybe I will study something else that will be more active than consuming information. One of the sad things that one sees is that, Africans, people are waiting for brands. I know I'll wait for J&J, I'll wait for Pfizer. Really, man. Yeah? You wouldn't even have volunteered for Pfizer to develop their vaccine, but you are waiting for Pfizer. But now when people are saying you are not coming to my country if you don't take one, it's unfortunate, but why is it unfortunate? The fingers point back to us. The fingers will always point back to us. Because one doesn't want to speak a certain way, but you realize that their interest, and people are protecting their interest. You cannot blame them. They are protecting their interest economically. They are protecting their interest socially. They are protecting their interest for survival. And that is what is happening. So us who are waiting for J&J and Pfizer and Alabama from Cuba, it's sad. It is sad. Yet we are told by someone else, you are not coming here if you don't take. That's maybe a topic for a different platform.
Okay, thank you very much, comrade doctors. And unfortunately, we have reached the end of our program. So, fellow Namibians, these are indeed trying times where we have to juggle between saving lives and preserving livelihoods. And scientific research has shown us that the only light at the end of the tunnel is for us to go out there in our numbers and get immunized so that we achieve the required herd immunity, so that our country can open up and we do away with this better normal, but go back to our old ways of living, our normal lives where the economy was flourishing, a lot of jobs were being created and places of worshiping were open, and gatherings would be allowed. So the only way out is for us to go out in numbers and get vaccinated, as opposed on relying on conspiracy theories and myth out there. So with that having been said from us here in studio at the Swapo Party headquarters, wish you a blessed evening. Please stay safe, continue wearing your face masks, sanitizing your hands, and observing the social distancing. From me, Owen Matengo, the moderator. Until next time, good evening, Namibia.